Okay, I thought this could be an interesting idea for a video. So 13 players were drafted at the quarterback position in this most recent draft, and I figured it could be fun to simply just rank them, not in terms of how good they are, but in terms of how good of a situation they are currently in. Now, when they were selected, we'll still kind of make or break some of this stuff, simply because, like, obviously Cam Ward is going to be in a situation where he's going to get a ton of playing time, whereas, Curtis Rourke might not ever get a snap on an NFL field, right? So because of that, where you were drafted will still change things. But yeah, let's get into the list. I will mention 4 players I'm kind of just going to touch on real quick and then not talk about too much more. Kyle McCord, Curtis Rourke, Cam Miller, and Graham Mertz are guys who I don't really see a pathway for them getting on a roster. It seems like if they do, it will be due to injuries, or they just are way better than we realized. But I'm not going to touch on them. Just I think they're kind of all going to be tied for 10th, I guess, and then we can just get into number 9. Number 9, I have Will Howard of the Pittsburgh Steelers, a guy who they took a late pick on, and the reason why I'm a little bit lower on this one is I just think Aaron Rodgers is going to be the starter. I just think that's what's going to happen. And for Will Howard, will you ever get on a football field? Maybe. I mean, for one thing, what if Aaron Rodgers isn't the starter? Okay, that would be a way. Or maybe you just play well enough in, practice and in training camp and into preseason that the Steelers ultimately say, okay, well, let's give this guy a shot in an actual game, maybe after Aaron Rodgers leaves after a year or two. There's things like that, but ultimately it's just a little bit backlogged, so that's why I have him at 9. Number 8, I'm going with Riley Leonard, a player who has been drafted by the Indianapolis Colts late in the draft. He is another player who, the reason why I like his spot a little bit is that A, it's not a horrible situation to play in, and B, you look at who the current starters, quote-unquote starters are, the quarterback 1A and 1B, Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. Okay, that's a position where I could see a scenario where, let's say Anthony Richardson continues to struggle, let's say Daniel Jones comes in and he struggles. Could you at some point say, well, let's give Riley Leonard a shot? Again, I don't love it just because you're quarterback 3, and that's kind of hard to break into, but at least it's an established kind of decent team with some quarterback questions, which if he does get in, he could maybe have some success. Number 7, I'm going Quinn Ewers, who was drafted late in the draft by the Miami Dolphins, who again, for the Dolphins, they don't have a loaded quarterback room, but they have a clear starter. Tua is the clear starter, and I like Tua a lot. When I said they don't have a loaded quarterback room, that wasn't a diss towards him. It's me talking about the backups that is the issue, because Zach Wilson is, listen, he has had a moment or two in the NFL. He had a lot of good moments in college, but ultimately it's a job you can win. The backup job is a job you can win. And if you can win the backup job, let's just be honest, Tua has injury history, and it sucks, but it's part of it. So if Tua does miss 3 games and you're able to step in there, you're in a good situation with a good play caller. Usually guys can get schemed up, and maybe you can have some success that way. Granted, it seems like every backup quarterback for the Dolphins stinks, but, it just historically, it feels like whatever happens, it usually doesn't go well, but there's at least a way to get playing time and be in a good situation if you do get playing time. Number 6 is where I have Saylor Sanders, who, the good news is, once he fell to round 5, I think Cleveland was a team you wanted to go to, because it's a quarterback competition that, it's a competition, right? Ultimately, the fact that he's going to be first day of training camp, he's going to be quarterback 4 because they have, Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, who I'm assuming will be the top 2 just because they played before. Gabriel was drafted ahead of Sanders, so he's going to be 3. Sanders is going to be 4. Sanders is going to have to, he's going to have to prove himself, and he's going to have to prove himself right away. That being said, at least if he does prove himself, there's a pathway on the field, whereas someone like Ewers, even if he plays great in preseason and training camp, he's not going to start week 1. So that's the benefit for Sanders. Number 5, I decided to go Jalen Milroe. I really kind of went back and forth on exactly where I should put him, because there's the obvious downside, which is the Seahawks have a quarterback. So Milroe was drafted in the 3rd round by the Seahawks. The Seahawks have Sam Darnold, who they just paid a bunch of money to. But here's my logic. A, if Milroe can find a way to get some playing time, if they're, for whatever reason, I think the Seahawks have a pretty solid situation. It's not a great offensive situation, but it's a pretty solid one. I also think that there is something where for Darnold, we don't know if he's going to hit. He had one good year in Minnesota. It's not like impossible for Milroe to end up being the starting quarterback there. So because of that, and just there's just the voodoo magic of the Seahawks doing something similar with Russell Wilson when they signed Matt Flynn, but then Wilson won the starting job. Will that work out this way? It'd be hard to say for sure. Obviously, the biggest downside is just, again, similar to a lot of these other guys. If he plays great in preseason and training camp, that doesn't guarantee a starting job. So number 4, I went with Dillon Gabriel, who I think doesn't have to be awesome in preseason and training camp to potentially get a starting job, as long as he can just play okay, just because I'm assuming he's ahead of Sanders on the depth chart given where they were drafted. As long as he can come in and play all right. Again, for him, it's almost like, the expression of if you're in the woods with a friend and you see a bear, you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun your friend. It's almost like Gabriel just has to outrun Sanders in the beginning part of this, and if he can do that, then eventually you assume the Browns, unless they have a good year, which I don't think is going to happen, you assume that the fans will get frustrated and want to see one of their young quarterbacks play, and if Gabriel's higher on that list, he will then get playing time. So I think Gabriel will probably get some playing time this season. Again, what will he do with that playing time? Well, that remains to be seen, but I think it'll probably at least happen. Number 3, I am going with Tyler Shuck here, the player who was drafted at pick 40. I think if the Saints drafted him with that pick, they want to use him. There is the question mark with Derek Carr and his health, and quite frankly, even if Carr says, actually, I'm fine, I'm going to start the year, you can't really expect him to play 17 games at this point in his career, so Shuck will probably get time in the lineup. They will probably do what they can to help him out when he gets time in the lineup, and there are some options here for the Saints. They did just draft a tackle. Again, hopefully Chris Olave stays healthy. There's a lot of that stuff going on, but there at least is something here offensively. There seems to be a pretty clear pathway for him to get some time. I'd quite frankly be shocked if he does not play at least a few games next year. Number 2, I'm actually going Cam Ward at number 2, and I'll explain why a little bit more in my when I get to number 1. First off, I think the Titans are in a pretty good situation. Like, the offensive line, it's not ideal, but they've done a lot of work on it. They made it competent, which is a lot more than you could say last year. They do have Calvin Ridley. They have a couple other options at receiver as well. So listen, would you love to go to Kansas City like Mahomes got to do? Sure, that would be a perfect situation. But this is a fine situation. I think the only real downside and what ultimately cost it and maybe bump it down to 2 is there really is no veteran quarterback in the room. I would have loved to see them just sign even a Joe Flacco, just get a veteran in the room where if Ward does struggle in preseason and training camp, you can decide to say, oh, we'll have Flacco start and then eventually transition to Ward, let Ward watch a bit. Ward pretty much has to come in and play. Like, he's going to have to play like 17 games. So his downside is the opposite of other players, where some players, it's like, can they get into, on the field? Ward's just going to be stuck on the field basically this year, which sometimes works out. Sometimes it can be a bit too much. So just because of that, I docked it a little bit. And number 1 is Jackson Dart, which, I kind of think this is the ideal situation for a quarterback to get drafted into I guess there could be better situations, but I think the Giants have talent offensively, right? I do. The Malik Neighbors is good. Not saying it's Cincinnati here or Tampa Bay, but they have talent offensively around the quarterback. And Dart doesn't have to come in and play. You have Jameis Winston, you have Russell Wilson, you have, I think, Brian Dable, who has developed quarterbacks well, right? Very famously, Josh Allen. So you have a really good quarterback room and situation to help him develop. He doesn't have to play right away. They'll probably have him sit at the beginning, but also if he plays well enough, he can still win the job, because when you're a first-round quarterback, people are paying attention. You can't not play your first-round quarterback. Even Johnny Manziel ultimately got playing time. He's going to get on the field, and, the question will be exactly when, but, he's going to be able to sit, he's going to be able to learn, and he'll be able to get on the field probably next year, and we'll see what he can do there. But yeah, I think it's I think the only concern, I guess, is like if Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston plays awesome, and then they want to have the job. But even then, the Giants would probably just do a Sam Darnold thing and let him walk and have Dart go. So we'll see exactly what happens, but I do think he's in the best situation. Him and Cam Ward, though, clearly in the top 2 situations as just guys who are going to get playing time. Everyone else has to fight for that. But yeah, kind of an interesting video topic, so hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know your thoughts. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.